HP and Razer make some of the most popular gaming laptops in the gaming laptop segment, but HP has also started making a budget line that uses a lot of the same high-end components, but packages that in a chassis that might not wow, but does have some legit power to it. So when we look at the HP Victus 16 and the Razer Blade 15, which one comes out on top? Is it worth spending twice the amount on Razer? Let's find out. I can't slam them down because you've seen how much this one wobbles. And while we're finding out, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. It's so crazy when we get the laptops packed in like this. It's like, okay, you can figure it out too, right? Let's get to the comparison. A couple of quick notes before we begin. No one provided me either of these laptops. I purchased both of them with my own money, and one of the things that's kind of frustrating is the HP Victus model that I bought is $899, and it's frustrating because immediately after I bought it, it was dropped by $100 on Best Buy's website, so you can get this for a lot cheaper than I did. The Razer we'll be talking about today is the current offering, and I want to stress, this is the currently available model with the 10750H RTX 3060 option coming in at $1799, and yes, while I was working on this video, Razer did update their website with the 11th gen pre-order, so we'll probably have to revisit this in the near future. Hooray for the March of Progress, but that's just a pre-order. This is still the one you buy today. First off, let's cover those specs and ordering options if you've never actually seen anything about either of these laptops. The HP Victus is a brand new line from the computer juggernaut aimed at the more budget conscious among us. From what I've seen on their website, this does seem to be a pretty versatile laptop, having several different processor and GPU combinations. There is another model that's, I guess, technically below this that starts at $799, but again, my version that cost me $899 was dropped by $100. And with that other version, you'll get the AMD Ryzen 5 5600H 6-core processor, 8GB of RAM, a 256GB solid-state drive, and the NVIDIA GTX 1650 Ti. You can take the Victus all the way up to an 8-core Ryzen 7 5800H or an 8-core Intel i7 11800H, 32GB of RAM, a 1TB solid-state drive, and that Ryzen model can come with an NVIDIA RTX 3060 graphics card, and that will run you $1509, which that isn't that bad for such a beefy machine. The Razer, on the other hand, is a little easier to digest because there are not nearly as many options. You can get either the base or the advanced model, but today we'll be focusing on the base model. Base. I need to learn how to write better. The biggest difference inside of the base model is you can get either the 3060 graphics card or the 3070, and there are a couple of different display options. So the lowest end option will come in at $1699, and for that money you'll get the 6-core Intel i7 10750H, 16GB of RAM, a 512GB solid-state drive, and the RTX 3060 graphics card. And at the slightly higher end, you can get the QHD 165Hz refresh rate panel model with the 3070 for $2199. Whew, that was a slightly bigger pain in the butt than normal for specs. Thank goodness. I hate talking about specs so much, so thank goodness those are out of the way. When we start comparing the laptops, first off, let's talk about power, because obviously these have different processors, so they're not going to line up totally one for one. But again, remember, the point of this video is not how do these stack up fairly and in a one-for-one comparison. The point of this video is the Razer worth twice what the Victus will cost you? I initially thought that because the Victus was rocking an i5, that it would suffer pretty seriously compared to the higher-end i7 found in the Blade. But when we look at the processors, I have to give Intel some credit. The 11400H pretty much stomps the 10750 in both single-core and multi-core performance in my quick benchmarks. While both are 6-core processors, the i5 scores higher by a significant margin on both Cinebench and 3D Mark for the processor. Normally, when we do see generational differences, you'll see the differences inside of a processor line. So the 11th gen i7, I would assume, and the one that we would see being the more powerful than the 10th generation i7. But seeing such a big difference from the 11th gen i5, that's very impressive to me. And I know that's not necessarily a Victus thing, that's an Intel thing, but that's seriously impressive that you can get a budget laptop with this much power. Though when it does come to like the overall power of a laptop, there are more things to consider than just the processor. The graphics card, that's also pretty important too, right? It's a gaming laptop. You probably want to be playing games. When we checked out the Dell XPS 15 and 17 over the past month, I was very impressed with the RTX 3050 in both my small amounts of gaming and my somewhat intensive video editing uses. That graphics graphics card held up very well, being the low end of the RTX line. What's weird is those versions of the 3050 had less power than this version of the 3050. This 3050 is powered at 75 watts, which that's pretty respectable, again, for a budget machine. However, this is the one point where I really do think the higher end 3060 is either worth the $400 premium on the Victus or the $700 premium on the Razer, because it performs substantially better here. You can see from the 3D Mark scores that while the CPU on the Victus is much higher, the graphics card on the Razer is far better. This is because a couple of things, right? Obviously, the 3060 is perched higher on the graphics card totem with more video memory and a higher clock speed, but this one is also powered at 95 watts compared to the 75 watts of the Victus. If these were productivity machines, I wouldn't care about this as much. I wouldn't care about this, and I would say, yeah, it doesn't matter, just pick whichever one you like, and that will be the best for you. And yeah, that's still kind of true, but the whole reason to get a gaming-specific laptop is for gaming-specific power, right? And that, I think, is going to be the biggest difference between these two power-wise. Okay, next up, let's talk portability, because if you weren't ever planning on moving the computer, I would say don't buy a laptop and just buy a desktop. Save yourself the hassle and some money. Surprisingly enough, these two line up pretty darn well for portability. Both have basically the same I/O, HDMI, USB-A, USB-C, Ethernet. These are they're both really well laid out. I'm very happy what you get built into these bodies here. Both also have proprietary larger power bricks, and because of these being gaming laptops, you'll definitely need to take that with you wherever you go, because battery life not going to be great here. So I can't really use the power brick as a discriminator here either. And both are roughly the same size with roughly the same screen size, so it's hard to say one is better than the other when they line up so much in so many things. When it comes to portability, I think the biggest difference and the purchase decision maker will come down to the fact that the Razer has Thunderbolt while the Victus does not. If you were somebody that doesn't care about Thunderbolt, great. That's another way to save you money, don't worry about it. For somebody like me though that primarily uses Thunderbolt, this kind of sucks. And I don't know if it's because it comes in both Intel and Ryzen variants that there is no Thunderbolt across the board for the Victus, but I really wish the Intel models had Thunderbolt. It's one of the strongest selling points of Intel motherboards and processors for me right now. So much of my computer setup is built on Thunderbolt. In all fairness, you don't really need it here because of all the I/O we talked about a few moments ago. I mean, you can have a full working from home or gaming setup from the I/O that you get here, but this part kind of sucks for me. And finally, let's talk about practicality, or how are the computers to use? Well, we talked about power earlier on, and for me, the most important part of a laptop is how well is that computer thermally managed? Am I going to get all of that power that I just paid for, or is it all going to be left by the wayside? Here, this is actually a good news story for both. I haven't had any major thermal problems with either laptop. I was kind of nervous about the Victus because as we saw in the unboxing video, its heat pipe system, it's kind of small, and while yes, this is only an i5, we did see that this i5 is putting out more power than the i7. While running the CPU benchmarks, this thing was running at 100%, and while the system itself said it was power throttling, it wasn't because of the thermals. I don't know, Intel chips can just be weird. Running at full out did not cause this computer to go over that 75-degree mark, which yeah, I'm impressed by that. I think part of why this is so well thermally managed is that right here, like at the top of the body here, I said this was a speaker. It's not a speaker. Thank you for those that corrected me in the comments below. This is a huge intake for the fan, and it works. It straight up works. I've also had no major issues with the Razer, so good news for both that thermally, they're okay. How do the physical bodies hold up though? Well here, much like graphics card, you can really see where your extra money is going. The Victus is full plastic construction and it feels cheap. I can't even say that it feels budget because I've got laptops that are fully plastic that do not feel cheap. This body, can you hear that? That's what cheap sounds like. Plus, because of its plastic construction, there is a large amount of flex in the body itself. And look how hilariously the screen wobbles at the slightest touch. I'm not even all that mad by this. This is just funny to me. The Razer is made out of a full metal construction and looks and feels fantastic. Oh, you can't see this, but there was an asterisk by look that we'll get around to that in a second. And that second is now. Yes, the Victus feels cheaper. It does. But the Razer, despite how good it looks, only looks good if you never touch it. I love how this laptop looks, but it smudges the second you look at it. Look how clean it is. Look at that. I just barely touched it right now. It's so bad and it's so incredibly distracting that it makes you look like you don't take care of your tech. We got to clean this right now because I can't have you all staring at that for the rest of the video. I'm not much of a nitpicker, but this drives me absolutely up the walls about Razer's laptop materials. Razer, your material engineers, whoever designs this, you guys got to figure this out because it's such a problem. The Victus does not have this problem. Look at that. Do you see any smudges? No, it might be all plastic, but at least that plastic doesn't make a mess. The keyboards on both are fine. I actually really like the keys on the Victus far more, and I've enjoyed typing on the Victus a lot more than I like typing on the Razer. And if you are somebody that needs it, the Victus has a full number pad included with the keyboard. The only thing that I don't like about typing on the Victus is it feels a little cramped. I don't know if it's actually cramped or what, but when I'm typing, it really feels like my fingers are running into each other, and it might be because of that trackpad that we talked about, but the keys themselves feel very Apple-like, and for me, that's a good thing. I know we're talking about Windows laptop, and Windows folks can sometimes be very angry about Apple stuff. Having an Apple-like keyboard is good for me. Upgradability, both computers will allow you to replace the included 2 sticks of RAM. The Razer allows for up to 64 gigabytes, while the Victus allows for 32 gigabytes. And while that sounds pretty bad, I'm not all that sure that it is that bad. If you were buying one of these gaming laptops, I don't really expect you to need 64 gigabytes of memory. Honestly, I do most of my work today with a machine with 16 gigabytes of RAM, so the difference doesn't seem all that great. That's not to say there aren't folks out there that do need that. So if you are one of those that definitely needs to push the RAM to the max, yes, get the Razer, it's going to come out on top. But I think 32 gigabytes, especially for the gaming you're going to be doing on a budget computer, that's more than enough. When it comes to the displays, the Razer on all models has the clearly superior display. Both of these panels are 1080p, but the Razer gives you a couple of high refresh rate options, either 144 Hz or 165 Hz on the QHD model. And remember, we are talking about the base model here. The advanced model does have a few more options. Much like we talked about with the graphics cards, normally I don't put that much emphasis on refresh rates for monitors, but again, this is a gaming laptop, and gaming is the one place where faster refresh rates are objectively better than slower monitors. Plus, the Razer's construction again rears its ugly head where, look at that, doesn't really wobble all that much. And the Victus, it just flops. It's so funny. I can't see that without laughing. But at the end of the day, so what, right? Should you spend double the money on the Razer, or is the budget option better and will save you tons of money? As we saw in the video, both of these computers perform pretty well at different things. The Victus with its processor power and the Razer with its graphical prowess. And I don't think my conclusion here will change all of that much even when the 11th gen blades come out in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. Even if this does do better across the board, it is still twice the money, so it should do better, right? I mean, the Razer is the better gaming laptop. It's got the better screen, better graphics power, better peripherals, better upgradability, but it will still cost you around twice what the Victus does. And I think the Victus really impressed me today with how close it was able to close the gap with this high-end machine and do it all for under $900, under $800 if you see it with the deal. I think this is a really great option if you do not need that faster refresh screen and you don't need Thunderbolt. If you treat this like a box O specs, I think this is a fantastic gaming option. And HP, I don't know that I've ever talked about an HP computer before, but you've done a great job here. But if you do need the most power and the faster screen, yeah, you should go with the Razer Blade 15. Thanks to today's sponsor, Squarespace, you can create your own very beautiful website. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a professional website, online store, or portfolio. It's so easy to claim a domain/URL, create a custom site that matches your style, and brings your ideas to life. Head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, head on over to squarespace.com/everydaydad to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And thank you for watching.